professor at Fresno City College and is the author of the recently published book of poems, Entering a Light, by Ars Publico Press, 1990, I believe. You probably have some copies tonight. He was born in Fresnillo, Mexico, and later moved to Mexicali with his family where he grew up. Other books authored by Trejo include The Day of Vendors, Instrucciones y Señales, Los Nombres Propios, El Día Entre las Hojas, all published in Mexico. He was nominated for the Xavier del Arte Prize in 1984 and was awarded the Columbia University Translation Grant. He has been included in no less than 7 anthologies, including Peacewood, 19 Personal Poets, Silver Skates, 1987, which he co-authored with John Weinberg. My first introduction to Ernesto was about 10 years ago, by way of Bob Jones in San Diego. Bob and I had driven across town and walked into a bookstore, Pickwick, I think. And we were in there looking at some books, and Bob nudged me and said, "Say, you know, was in here one time the great Mexican poet Ernesto Trejo, standing right over there, looking at a book." You know who Ernesto Trejo is. He lives in Fresno. I figured that at the time, when I get back to Fresno, I'm going to find out who the hell Ernesto Trejo is. I think that aside from the many talents of Ernesto's poetry, I like to characterize them as poems of being and essence. Poetry that achieves power by naturally positioning itself in the backwash of the mind, where change, outflow of being can be more correctly seen, where experience can be affirmed, where essence and integrity take up their sound and space, where particulars can be sorted and given their qualifications, where one's real history can be viewed like a tide pool, where drama can backtrack into hard memory, and where symmetry of spirit can process the jarring of objective confrontations, and loss can become doubly useful. It is as if being naturally belongs in the backwards of experience. The analogies in Ernesto's poems seem to come so quickly to life and are enchanted. His poems give back what the fullness of mind has received. His poems seem to bring forth things hidden and enjoyed as subjective possessions, and they are also echoes within a civilized complexity of change that is local, national, international, real, necessary, poignant, with cheerfulness, misgiving, unpredictability, that admits no hint of miracles to come, which great poets leave to the lesser poets. I'd like to introduce to you Ernesto Trejo.
I'd like to open with a couple of poems in Spanish. Las frutas. Claro que hay frutas terribles. La sandía es la sangre de la tierra que fluye dentro de la jadea verde. Limón, limón en las llagas del hijo del carpintero. Naranjas como tardes ciruelas que cuelgan de un árbol, murciélagos sedientos y amarrados, fresas que tiemblan como cejas antes de rodar por el suelo. Noche y día. A mi lado duermes, estás más allá de mí y mis brazos no pueden contenerte. Ahí soy un punto en el espacio que desaparece. Tus ojos perdidos se pierden en el vasto sepulcro lleno de una luz pareja. Despertarás al amanecer. Estaré a tu lado, despierto. Con la noche aún revoloteando en tus ojos, la luz será luz en tus pupilas. One more. No hay más palabras. Blanca la noche, blanco el insomnio desbordado, blanco el espíritu del hielo y la hebra de luz sobre el ropero. Blanca tu mano, mi corazón confuso y agotado y tieso. Soy lo que soy. Si al tocarte me lleno de ti, y si dentro de ti me desbordase, sería esencia pura en la noche de tu cuerpo, sustancia total y a la vez partícula enardecida y sorda y ciega. Soy lo que soy, no más, mas tú también eres. Tú eres yo soy tú, y no hay más palabras, no hay palabras en la blancura de la noche. And now, not by microphone. No, it's not here. This poem takes the title after a movie. It's called Hunger. Hunger. I've carried this hunger for so long that by now I'm used to it. That's why I devour my breakfast of eggs and ham and potatoes. I amaze my friends with my style. That's why at potlucks I stand by the food table like an eager bodyguard, a hand by the gun with eyes alert. I spend half my paycheck at the supermarket. Sometimes I stop by only to gobble at the vegetables, and I feel their luscious forms, which someday I might consume. And the meats, which by turns delight me and horrify me, are a powerful magnet. Oh, the fatality of the cheeses, the irresistible coffees, the beer that calls my name, the sweet song of the bakery. I am at their mercy, mired hopelessly in the sweet mud of sin. What am I to do? Still the teenager who is starving after dinner, starving when I open my eyes at 4 a.m., during geometry and baseball, ever ready for the fritters, the vendors, and the teacher's hour. I've given up. My hunger consumes me, and I accept its fate. I've given up. Just like the times I have to drive to the ocean and stand mesmerized before the breaking waves until my nerves calm. Maybe it's the salt air that my lungs crave, or some drug that my ears and my eyes just have to have. Why do I have to be attentive to the starry nights and the silver galaxies traced by the snails after the rain? I breathe the moon in mixed with the orange blossom. The opening rose is a shy seductress who whispers God knows what dark secrets. My nose is in the business of spiders and worms, cats and dogs, my children, tomatoes, Rimbaud and weeds, sparrows and the mystery of my dreams. My appetite covers me like a second skin. Since I can't run away from it, I accept it like a glass of water, at the bottom of which something like the ocean wraps. One summer. Against the elm that spans rumor up and down the block, one afternoon, your bike leaned like a drum, among others, a pearl of sweat on the handlebar. Your hero that summer? The kid who climbed the streetlights and shattered them one by one with his baseball bat. Hair to the armpits, like weeds in a baby block. Tyranny of tight shoes, your bones stretching like a cat dog. You bow to the crown of blood, your foot pierced by a rusty nail. You bow to the stars that came out like shy students and took their places. You bow to the warm shoulders of desire, nudging you like a brother in the dark. I suppose a lot of my work is nourished by memory, fantasies that we conjure up in memory. This poem, Good Day, is pretty straightforward. I don't know if the events happen this way, but it seems that's the way it should happen. A good day. Father, one summer I was 7, on a Sunday, the usual day for miracles. You held me and my brother all afternoon, slapping the river. Told us to open our eyes on the water and not to be afraid. There I saw the current combing your legs, small, sturdy, the tired legs of a barber. Later you swam where it was deep, with us clinging to your neck until you said, let go, knowing that we wouldn't sink. At dusk, we drove back to town and didn't tell you how much water we had swallowed all day. How we felt the slice of moon tickling our bellies, a barber's razor knocking softly against your head, your profile of stone, a calm fist against the night, and all the hands that held it. The next poem is called Death in the Family. I take the title from a book by the anthropologist Oscar Lewis, A Death in the Sanchez family, which deals with the events surrounding when you get there. This is A Death in the Family. Sort of longish, but it's a prose poem. I was off to Los Angeles to the burial of my cousin. The drive, as usual, was tedious, except for the sunset in the mountains and the stops to sip coffee from the thermos bottles. The Nicaraguan deacon asked, may I have your permission to address you in Spanish? I want to speak to Brother Ezekiel in my tongue. Less than 1 out of 4 understood the question, since he was posed in Spanish, let alone the sermon that followed, starring Lazarus. What a cruel joke to address a corpse of Lazarus risen from the dead. Then he went on and on about Brother Ezekiel not really being dead. The sermon was still floating in the air when I walked out to view the coffin. The gruesome face of death gave nothing back. The pitiful face of death made me feel pitiful and gave me not a sense of brevity, but of the ridiculousness of my self-importance. The face of death snickers at us from the faces of the dead, the living who are scrutinized, the living who have to answer questions, the living who stare blankly at each other before the corpse of a loved one and think, hell, it could have been me. But it was Ezekiel, my brother's nephew, who 40 years before had been entrusted to him and his new bride for 3 years, who at 13 broke another boy's arm for ridiculing his soft R's. When I met him in the 50s, he had 5 children of his own, who settled in the life of Mexican-American blue-collar Whittier. Still, the upturned smile, the kids glint in the eyes. I saw him then as the epitome of style, his black hair fluttering in the wind as he rode his Harley. But these are my memories, the events as I saw it. In the end, Ezekiel was consumed, fragile, what little hair left gone gray. Oh, the indignity of death after a long cobalt treatment. It was a good thing the father was not there. The next morning there was a woman who wailed so loudly that I felt she desecrated the last few minutes of the burial. She was wife number 3. She had been out all night on cigarettes and coffee for the last 3 days. But I found dignity in his children. Eddie, Ernie, Ricky, Terry, and Virgie, my age, looking haggard, exuded wisdom in her calm beauty. They are now older than Ezekiel was when I met him. There is a country in the mind, made of other times and places. Ezekiel wanders on his motorcycle and toasts his memories of Mexico. In that republic, I am 9, with a wisdom seldom again matched, for I knew by then the elusiveness of time and space, but also the strength of memory. For my best friend had just died in the rain, and I had looked death in the eye, and that night dreamed that he went back a last goodbye. This time there was no winking back. There was a man lowered in coffin to wander off in the thick waters of death, and dozens of relatives milling around, greedy or absent-minded, I don't know which. And there I was, attending a funeral for the second time in my life. At my window. At my window, I write. 3 children in swings, testing how high they can go, how much the chains will hold. I imagine this April air humming in their throats, the trees behind them disappearing like ice. Off to one side, a younger kid awaits his turn. He pats the ground while his mouth opens in a cry or a yawn. Today, I feel like that kid. Last night, I opened my arms to embrace my new dreams. And when I awoke, I went around shutting every door and window. Nothing would happen. The sky would go on circling above. The trees would dig deeper. In this corner of the planet, with an angle of sunlight on my shoulder, my pencil tucked away, I stand up and read. Some years ago, I wrote a sequence of poems, out of which I published 5 in Into the Life, in which I made up a character whose initial is E. Who is me and who is not me? Or maybe it's just a way of speaking about myself. Supposedly. This is called E and Socolo. A Socolo is a small, or it's a square. In this case of this poem, it's the square of a small town. At the small Socolo, sipping beer and bored, sunlight was a faded scribble in the west. The heat was ascending like a saint, the empty streets going nowhere, the signs urging no one, the droopy leaves like rags. I'm not sure. Maybe all that silence spilled out of the church. Maybe the blank sky suspended was the stillness of my life. And that moment was the many afternoons in the dead center of the wheel. Then first on the highest cross, then on the eaves, on the unused balconies, on the trees and the telephone lines, the sparrows under flapping filled the little world of the Socolo. A cloud of wing or a black cape coming finally to rest. I don't know what followed. Maybe they kept raining down like stones. Maybe the silence is only inside. Maybe the sparrows were dusting the air, stars, the black gloves of happiness, the speech of God. Or maybe, they were sparrows, because hours later, when the east ignited and caught on fire, they left again in silence for the fields. And I stood up and left that bench to warm up my hands, to pour some coffee over them, to make them come to see as eyes, not to obey and sit still like hands. In the next poem, the same character, E falls in love. E is in love. What fire glows under her skirt? What sparrow is gnawing at his heart? The April air is slapping him all the way home. The stupid trees running after the awkward poem circling his heart. The stars are dust on the table. His dry throat is asking. Go on, stupid heart. Go on loving her. Everything you do speaks like a mouth, but you have nothing to say. You wake up to words, table, lipstick, balcony hanging like a tongue, flower pot. Objects, humble like your heart. It's the world that shouts her name. The moon, tedium under his pillow. The night, sprouting like a fountain. His heart, a matchbook holding its breath. People, dry sticks poking through wire. The streets, question marks pointing nowhere. His body, his living body, his blood like ink and pulling, going crazy. The next poem, It's Your Name, and it's also December. It's your name, and it's also December. The last lights of the town blank out like the poles that climbs two churches and stops. I watch you fall asleep and find you not the hunter but the deer. Find you a patch of flowers on a terrace facing the white sea, winter without end. In other cities, men rise. In other dreams, cities rise nameless. A brute force when your fingers part, or else the procession of the wind pauses before your fingers. It's the spaces between the stars, the quiet march of the sun lying in ambush. It's the words that stop squealing. What skin isn't bare? What fist doesn't pound on a wall? It's the snow blowing through every garden, entering every house. A.M. Under the covers, the winds of sleep rock the poppies of your breasts. We close our eyes to this life and open them to the other. Next to the eagerness of the fly, the wrath of a flock of sparrows, and the saintliness of a horse, you fall off the precipice of the day's bridge. The teeth of winter also sleep for a while. Under the bed, my shoes too rest their burning eyes. At 2 a.m., God comes out to stretch his legs and lights the cigarette of a whore that struts in front of the drugstore. The plant of solitude that spawns fraternities, snake and hare, owl and mouse, is dispelled when I exist in your dream, alongside with who I was and will be. The night is a night of divine dust. You arch a shoulder and office buildings collapse. When your knees point skyward, there's thunder in the desert. If you were to open your eyes now, you would mangle the continent. Next poem is called Red. I got the idea from Rimbaud, who assigned coloration to vowels and different letters. So this one is on the color red. Which for me is very significant. For you, maybe red doesn't mean much. For me, it's one of the few colors that I can see. Red. One time, the whole world wore red. Flower pots, earth, blood, flesh. Red water sifted through red earth. Perplexed birds filled their beaks with dirt red air. I saw them through red irises and beyond a heaven carved by sulfur. Red, the beginning, veins, the sun's lament. Red, crabs, their hungry pincers. The wisdom of the heart is red. Red was for stop, don't do it. The dust on the roadside was red, and the first star that winked was a premonition of the scratch of a paw upon my hand. Today, I'll sit still. Today, I'll sit still. When my dog shuffles over and offers me his fleas and his soul, I'll turn away. To everything, I'll close my eyes, slice the darkness, and eat it. I'll refuse to give money on a platter or a wet kiss under the moon. Today, I'll just sit and say no to everyone and everything. To the book on my desk, its sad tale of abandonment, remorse, and death. I'll keep it on the tip of my tongue, like a lukewarm dime. No to the Daily Mail with its greasy fingers. No to the telephone and its humming through the carcass of a sparrow. No to every projection of the self. No to me, this preposterous accident who speaks of the self. Today, I'll be antisocial. Today, I'll grow to myself, be the river of my blood, the sky inside my eyes, the maze of my ribs, the dust that settles on my heart. I'll let my bones sink like pebbles in a pond. I'll let my feet grow roots and be an extra zero on the checks that I refuse to write. Let me read two more poems on a birthday. I learned one thing. Death is no longer remote. It happens to people that I know. An aunt collapses with a thud. Her heart gives out like a battered fiber. An uncle's life drains out like the light of this day. Something like the feet of mice scuttles in the dark corridors of my cousin's throat. Bodies crumble, the earthworm's appetite. Only the earth does not suffer. Today, as death came and sat by my side, questions poured out from the eyes of my dead, like so many snowflakes.